Welcome to the September 26, 2007 edition of the ListenToUs.com video log, brought to you by ListenToUs.com, exposing the threat of the New World Order. I'd like to start with a disclaimer. If I mention any websites during the vlog, does not mean that we endorse the views, all the views found on that website. Pretty much this week's vlog is going to be on, I'm 2 days late on it because of developments with HR2640. I wanted to fully research it before I went off on it on Monday night, and what HR2640 deals with is it's the NICS Improvements Amendments Act of 2007. For those of you unfamiliar with the NICS, it's the National Instant Criminal Background Check System that when you go to purchase a firearm, you are bumped up against that system to see if you're a criminal or have been adjudicated of mental illness up until this law by a court, or committed or something like that. I've read this bill in its entirety. I reread it, and then I read it again. And on the third time is when I realized that there's one paragraph in here that completely decimates the Second Amendment. This is flawed legislation, piggybacked on top of previously flawed legislation, which was the Brady Bill. We were warned by government watchdogs and gun lobbyist groups that the Brady Bill was flawed legislation. We didn't raise enough cane about it. It became law. I'm going to read you a paragraph of Section 102 of HR 2640, Section 102, subsection C, paragraph 4. A record that identifies a person who has been adjudicated mentally defective or committed to a mental institution as determined in regulations implementing Section 922G4 of Title 18 United States Code as in effect on this date, on the date of the enactment of this act, and whose record is not protected from disclosure to the Attorney General under any provision of state or federal law. The problem with this entire bill, on the surface, like I said, it looks like improvements on the NICS system. It's going to be updated quarterly, things of that nature. Okay? Which I have no problem with a severely mentally ill person not being able to purchase a firearm. I have no problem with a convicted felon, especially a violent felon, not being able to own a firearm or purchase a firearm. As we found out since the passage of the Brady Bill, it's not going to stop a felon from getting a firearm. They're criminals, for crying out loud. If they want a firearm, they're going to get one. They don't care that it's against the law. They're criminals. Anyway, I'm digressing. The problem with this entire bill is this line, and whose record is not protected from disclosure to the Attorney General under any provision of the state or federal law. So in other words, if you've been diagnosed, they're calling this the Veterans Disarmament Act. And effectively that's what it is. If you've been diagnosed with any form of post-traumatic stress disorder, whether you're a police officer, a person in the military, whatever, okay, single incident, doesn't matter. If it's part of your record, you're getting dumped into the database. Then come in and take your firearms from you and or prevent you from buying new firearms. This completely decimates the Second Amendment. And see, if we don't preserve the genius of our forefathers, our children and our grandchildren will be lost. Most people think the Second Amendment is put in there for self-defense from criminals or an invasion of this country or whatever. That may be true. The reason that our forefathers put the Second Amendment in here, in the Constitution, Bill of Rights, was to protect us from a tyrannical government. And those minions furthering the cause of the New World Order constitute a tyrannical government, and therefore firearms are a threat to them. Let's say you pulled you were in the military 15 years ago. Pulled a 48-hour guard duty because you weren't relieved. You're in a foreign country. You didn't get to eat much during that time. You pass out. Send you to the infirmary. They say, oh, you just had a small case of post-traumatic stress syndrome or traumatic stress syndrome. That would be post because that happens afterwards. You know what I mean? Boom. They come into your home, take your firearms from you, prevent you from buying any firearms. Police officer, fireman. It's further reaching than that. These are the things I'm sure about. There are probably other things that I'm not sure about, so I'm not going to mention them. You're in a government school. Under the IDEA program, you are diagnosed of having ADHD. That's a mental disorder. Mentally defective. You got ADHD. You took Ritalin, things of that nature. Under the wording of this bill, they can prevent you from owning or purchasing a firearm. And they can come into your home and take them. People say, oh, that's semantics. They're not going to do that. How many things have we said, oh, they're not going to do that? And they did it. This is just another one. It's flawed legislation, piggybacking on top of other flawed legislation. I'll share with you in a minute the outrage of the views of the American people, the vast majority of us. First, I'm going to share with you something from Infowars.net. I don't agree with everything Alex Jones has to say, but I think he's dead on here. First of all, I'm going to talk about Chuck Schumer. Let me back up here. This is out of the article there. They'll be linked to any articles that I read during my vlogs are going to be linked to from my website, listenus.com. If you go to the blog section, this will be under the click blog, then click NWO blog, and look for 92607 blog, and click on that link. That'll take you to the blog itself on my website through YouTube or Google. Probably Google because of I'm at 8 minutes already. Because of the time limit at YouTube. Another of those behind the legislation is Chuck Schumer, who, according to Gun Owners of America, is circulating an agreement which would waive the Senate's rule in order to bring up and pass the bill. This agreement is extremely diabolical, as it would eliminate the ability of pro-gun senators to offer amendments which would clean up the legislation and would grease the skids for immediate passage. What that is if he gets a unanimous acceptance of this bill, there's no counted vote. Something else in this article says that Larry Pratt of Gun Owners of America has compared the Veterans Disarmament Bill to actions undertaken by the Clinton administration in the late 90s. This is his quote. This is exactly what Bill Clinton did over 7 years ago when his administration illegitimately added some 83,000 veterans into the National Criminal Information System, prohibiting them from purchasing firearms simply because of afflictions like PTSD. Pratt explains that the bill radically redefines key legal terms to allow gun ownership rights to be stripped on the findings of psychiatric diagnosis, where in the past gun rights could only be withdrawn through an adjudication by a judge, magistrate, or court with the protections of due process. Because of the wording in the bill,